Hello, sir. Can you hear me? Mr. Krebs? Okay. Microphone seems okay. Just checking my microphone. Fine. Maybe this will be better. Put on my headset. Okay, so I got two people on, and both of them are muted and no video. So I'm going to wait just a few minutes to see who else comes on. Okay. Hmm. Unmute. I'm back. Oh, it's actually 9:16. Okay, let's see who I have. I still have 2 people. Maybe more people will show up. I'm starting. Hello. Well, I'm live streaming as well. So if I see people are still muted, but I'm assuming that people can hear me because I see you there on my screen. So I'll assume that you can hear me. And if not, if you're missing me, then you can watch this on the live stream. I should maybe try to just send a little message, and I have to find out. I haven't done that in a while, but I can send a message to participants. Ask all to unmute. Okay, I might just ask everyone to unmute just so I can make sure you're there and watching. Because I can't see anybody. I see names, but I don't see. Okay, Mr. Krebs is unmuted, Ms. Collins. Okay, I just want to check that you're there.
Yep, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, you can mute again. You don't have to be unmuted unless you have questions. Then unmute and just interrupt me and let me know if you need to ask anything. Okay, so I'll just start talking. I've got here my Blackboard announcement from April 11th to the students, where I talk about the final exam. So I'll start with that. I'll just go through it and talk about some things, and then I've got some things that I wrote down. Actually, I don't want to blur the background because it's blurring too much. Hold on one second here. I really don't like Zoom very much. That option is not available now. Okay, that's Let me just check the video, just see if I can undo. There we go. Okay, good. Yeah, so I just wrote down some notes that I'll go over after I go over the bare bones, the essential components. The cats want to go up. Okay, so looking at my announcement of April 11th, dear students, the time limit is 2 hours. That's the time limit set by the university. So once the exam starts, as I'm sure you're already familiar with, or you will be familiar with if this is your first semester at college, you're allotted a 2-hour time period in your class. And I know this is online, but this is the same standard applies. I know that there was some confusion with a previous announcement where people thought that I was giving a 7-hour exam and they had to take 7 hours. No. That was just the time limit. I was just giving a very extensive time limit with my hope that it would allow people to go slowly and not be pressed for time to go through the exam. But the standard is 2 hours, so that's what I have to stick to. Obviously, if a person has a disability accommodation, that would be extended however much they needed. And the exam, I'm giving roughly 1 minute per question. So you should expect between 100 and 120 questions, probably closer to 120. So 1 minute per question. Which I think should be a fair amount of time, because some questions you might struggle with and might take some time. But I think a lot of the questions, if they're true, false, and multiple choice, should be something that you could go through within a minute is reasonable, even 30 seconds. But obviously other questions, you have to prepare for the fact that there might be other questions like multiple answer or matching questions that you're going to have to devote some time to, hopefully not too much. You don't want to stay too long on one question where you're not getting anywhere. But I'll talk about that later. So that's that. I'll move on to the other aspects of the exam. Once the exam starts, it has to be done in one sitting. Okay, just like if you were in a classroom, you can't leave. Well, you can leave. You could turn in what you got and leave, but you're going to be expected once you start the exam that the timer will be ticking away, and you won't be able to come back to do it. That's typical for being in a classroom, but also I think it's especially important for doing something online. I'm not saying anyone would do this, but there are the extra temptations for cheating. Whereas in a classroom, people can look around, but of course I'm there proctoring, so I can see what people are doing. I can't see what people are doing online. And with the way computers are, it's not beyond the pale that someone could have another browser open and just be searching for answers and whatever. So I want to keep these strictures there to try to, as much as possible, make it hard for someone to do that. Again, not that anyone would. So have it done in one sitting and not have people be able to sign out of it and then sign back in. That once the exam, you should prepare to take the exam. You should, your schedules better than I do. You know what other tests you have and what tests you really need to study for. And so you need to categorize, like, okay, this stuff I really need to focus on. And these are other classes, like say Dr. Dunn's class, where, okay, I can put it off to this date or whatever, but don't put it off too long. Okay, there is a deadline. Exam week ends, and when it ends, and that's it. There are no extensions for that, because basically the term is over, and I'm not obligated to work. The course is over. My job after that is putting in grades, and doing grades. So be aware of that. But so I understand that your schedule better than I do, and you should need to figure out, this is going to be a good time. This is going to be a day where I'm not going to be distracted. I'm going to have 2 hours that I can devote, and people need to know that. If you're home with your family, if you're in your dorm room with another student, people need to know that, okay, I'm doing my exam now. I cannot be bothered. All right, like with me, I got 2 cats. Hold on a second. Come on, get you. Want to go out? Go on. You always want to go out and come in, and then they go out and then want to come in, then they come in and then want to go out. Cats can't make up their minds, but they're cats. So it has to be done in one sitting. And I say here in the instructions that you have to be aware that if the exam is closed for any reason, it won't be reopened. And I'm not going to delete it. I mean, at this point in the semester, which is the end of the semester, those problems shouldn't be happening. And so I understand, and I know that on the quizzes, I was willing to be flexible, albeit taking a penalty for people who might have a technological issue. But again, that's something that is not my responsibility to take care of. The student needs to have a computer that is reliable, an internet connection that is reliable. Certainly don't try to take something like this on your cell phone. Even if it's like a primo phone, like an iPhone, which I guess iPhones are still like the best, but I don't know anymore with Android. Android might actually be better now, but nevertheless, that's a big no-no, because all sorts of problems can happen with that. And that's so I'll sympathize if a person is just beginning the test or halfway through. I can sympathize, but the test is that's an issue. Now I say in the instructions that if it's closed, I will not clear it. Okay. I thought about that, and I thought, okay, I maybe I'll be flexible on that to the extent that if a person has a technological issue, which is, again, that person's responsibility. I'm not saying it's the person's fault, okay, because things do happen, but it's the person's responsibility, not mine, that I will clear the exam. However, there will be a significant penalty. I might as well talk about it now, but I have it here in my notes that I was saying, that I was writing out before. So, I mean, if there is a problem, there will be a severe penalty. 25 points will be taken off, which is essentially dropping you by a letter grade. So considering the ideal grade, which would be an A, which would be the top range, you're okay, I'll clear it, but a person has seen the test or part of the test already, and now you're going to be starting at a B if I have to clear it for you. And so if you do perfectly, you'll get in the B range after that. But, my people usually don't do perfectly. Okay. I ask tricksy questions. All right. As you probably have noticed. So yeah, you might end up getting a lower grade than you might have gotten had everything just gone fine. And if it happens again, then I take off an additional 25 points. So now it's 50. So now you're starting at the C+ level for your final exam. I think this has to be because it is a final exam. It's a major component of the course. The other option is for me, if people don't like that, well, then the other option is for me to revert to what I previously said, which is nothing. Wherever you stopped in the exam when you had your problem is where it is, and it gets submitted as is. If it was after one question, as is. If it was near the end at 100 questions or 120, okay, as is. I think this will be more flexible, is being more flexible and benefiting the student, allowing the student to go back and take it. However, again, it is a major component of the course, and these things should not be happening at the end of the semester. It just simply shouldn't be. But I understand that they do. So yeah, there would be significant penalty. So be extra careful that you've prepared yourself and your surroundings to take the final exam. Because as I said, I will revise that, and I'll send out an announcement revising that portion of what I said, that, okay, I will clear an exam if someone has a technological issue, but there will be a severe consequence for that, because the person has seen part or most of the exam, and that has to be taken into consideration. Okay, the exam you have the whole exam period to get the exam done. So the exams start tomorrow, yes, Friday. And then they go throughout most of next week, yes? So they go until the 12th, which is, if I remember correctly, looking at my calendar, the 12th is a Thursday. Okay. I'm presuming, I guess the weekends are not included, but there's nothing saying you couldn't do the final exam since it's online. There's nothing saying you couldn't do it on the weekend. For those of you who are Catholic, I would not recommend doing it on Sundays. Leave that day for the Lord, but I do not judge. So yeah, you have that whole period of time. So you can set any day, but remember, again, once you start it, it's going to be going. You have to do it in one sitting. So it doesn't matter if it's the first day, a Friday, or a Tuesday, or even the last day. I do not recommend trying to do it on the last day. You're asking for a whole lot of trouble. I say you generically. I'm not saying you in particular who are watching, who are here now, but you're asking for a whole lot of trouble if you do that. And I might, well, anyways, certainly you're going to get a deduction if I have to clear the attempt and there's an issue. So just be aware of that. Try to do it on a day that's where you're going to have the least amount of stress and you can just focus on it. I would also not recommend that you try it on the first day, Friday, unless you feel like you're prepared, which, I still have to, and I'll do that today, put up the video links for the last couple of lectures. I mean, they're on YouTube. I mean, people have the address. They know my YouTube account where stuff is live streamed. So people could have taken the initiative and gone there and looked, but some people don't. So they need that extra help. So I put the links under class recordings. So I will do that. So, I mean, I don't as soon as exams are open, doesn't mean you have to rush to it and get it done unless you really feel like you're prepared for it. But I would not recommend that. I would recommend just taking the time, waiting till next week and getting it done then. But again, it's your decision, because it's your time that's your decision and your time. But it must be completed during that period. If the exam is, if the exam is not done by Thursday, or someone does it close to the deadline and it's over, The exam just gets submitted, and that's it. There are no extensions, beyond Thursday the 12th. Okay. Questions. I answered these in the announcement, so I don't feel like I have to go over them in incredible depth. But yes, as it says in the syllabus, and I've mentioned, I think, before in class, certainly when I talked about the syllabus at the beginning, it will be cumulative. So it covers all the information from the beginning of the course until our last class. So from when we open talking about religion in general and kind of trying to define it, get a handle on it, to the end when I talked about Jainism. So everything, those two things and everything in between is considered fair game for me. Will it have a lot of questions? I've addressed that. You can see 100 to 120, which people might think is a lot. Others might think it's not that much, but okay, whatever, it's relative. And well, I'll mention this as well about, I'll mention this on my notes after that. I'll come back to reusing questions from the quizzes, but yeah, basically if you've taken the quizzes, then you've pretty much studied for 80 to 85% of the final exam. You've already been studying for it. Maybe you didn't realize it, but because I am using and basing, not just reusing, but also basing questions off of the previous questions, because I make some modifications to a question or changes just to see if people were paying attention. You're basically already studied for the great bulk of the final exam. So calm down, be at peace. Okay. By the way, just a little thing. I understand that I look like I'm looking up at the ceiling and stuff like that and looking over you. I apologize for that. I bought a stupid gamer's computer. I thought it would have great memory and stuff like that, and it really doesn't. And for some stupid reason, they put the microphone or they put the camera at the bottom instead of at the top of the window. So I have to remember, I have to look down to be looking at you. Anyways, okay, moving on. Yes, you can use your notes, and I'll say more about that in a moment. Yes, you can use your notes. That's fine. Had it been in class, then I would have said no. I think I say no in the syllabus. And I don't think I would have changed my mind on that, but that's neither here nor there. I say, use your notes that you have. Okay, move on from that. How do I pass this test out? I'll move on from that. I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so I guess I'll move on to my own comments that I have, and so that covered kind of like the bare nuts and bolts. I guess I should add, people will still ask, well, what kind of questions are going to be on it? And again, as if I'm reusing or rehashing questions from the quizzes, then you kind of know what's going to be on there. I didn't ask any essay questions or short answer questions. My questions were basically multiple choice, true, false, multiple answer questions, and matching questions. Probably and some, be aware that some of them are in multiple choice, I guess, could be seen as kind of easy. True, false, though, be aware of that. True, false questions, in my experience, are not as easy as people might think they are. I mean, they're very easy to kind of write for me, and they're kind of easy to handle because they're not long. They're usually a sentence or two. So they can be deceptively easy. But I find that what happens is people overthink the true, false questions all the time. In fact, I've been tempted, and maybe I will do this next in the future, to just give one quiz or a whole exam with just true, false questions, because they're easy to write, but they're not easy apparently for people to wrap their heads around. People always seem to overthink the questions. And my rule of thumb is, if it's all true, then it's true. The moment you encounter something in the question that doesn't sound right, either it because you know the information, you're like, okay, he says that it is this, but I know it's not, then that's boom, all immediately, you know, it's false. What seems to trip people up is that they know that, but then they keep reading on, you know, in the question and with other stuff that might be completely true. And then they forget like what they realized, you know, and they're like, yeah, but the rest of this is all true. It's right, you know. So is it true now? Is it false? You know, no. If something is even a little thing is not right, then it's false. And I have to be careful with that. Okay, I try to be very clear cut in true false questions because I know that I can have an issue where if I'm not clear enough, someone might say, well, you just said even a little thing and this word you use could be interpreted different ways. So I try to be pretty clear, you know. But if something's completely true, you can't find anything that's just not right, then, oh yeah, that's true. You know, it's usually the stuff that's kind of true, and there's a lot of true, and then there's one little wrinkle, and that seems to trip people up because they see only the true stuff and they miss the wrinkle. So beware of true false questions. Multiple answer questions and matching questions, yeah, those have their own difficulties. You know, because you might think, well, you know, this information goes with that person, but I think it also goes with that person, and multiple answer, it's like that can just be kind of make you feel oppressed, like, you know, oh, look at all these answers and now I got to go through all of them. But as you're going through, you might see like, oh, check, yeah, I know that one, check, okay. So it's maybe not as daunting as it might appear when you like first look at it and you're like, oh man, there's multiple answer and there are like 10 different things, you know. All right, you just got to slog through it, but the answers are there and you might find that you really know them. Okay, now going to my thoughts. Number one, don't freak out. Don't freak out. People, you know, some people are comfortable with the course. They're taking it. They're just going through the requirements, and this is just another requirement, and they just want to get it done so they can get a grade and move on. But other people I find really do worry about their courses, and they're trying to figure out like, what's my GPA going to be after this, and what do don't worry. Let that handle itself. I mean, and those things do handle themselves. They work out if you do the work. And that's not meant to sound like a slogan or just a catchy phrase. But, you know, obviously, if you're doing work that's B level and A level, then it's going to work out that at the end of the day, you're going to have a GPA that's in the A or B level. Okay. If your work is average and it's a C, then, you know, that's what your GPA is going to work out at, and that involves all your courses, not just mine. So I'm not concerned about ruining someone's GPA, because if someone has a real worry about a GPA being lowered, that usually means there are issues in other courses as well. Not always, but in my experience, it can be. So just that's a side issue. The issue at hand is doing as best you can on the final, and look at the overall picture. It's 220 points of the final grade. So it's not nothing. Okay. So if you do really well, you're able to pull an A or a B. That's definitely something that's because it is weighted that way. It's not weighted like a paper. Okay. The one paper we did, it's not weighted like a quiz. It's weighted much higher. So even higher than all the quizzes taken together. So it's certainly going to lift your grade up. A person might be worried like, I'm pulling a C minus and I'm not. Okay, but if you do really well on the final, that might bring you up. I'm not saying it will, but it could conceivably bring you up to like a B or something you would be satisfied with. So I would say don't look at where you are now. Look at where you're going and you want to go. And you have to make that happen. I'm not going to fix it for you. You know, I'll do the test. I'll do a fair test. I think it's a fair test and the questions are fair, but I'm not going to fix it for people. I've given extra credits that people could have done or not done. That time has passed, unfortunately. Some people decided not to do it. They guess they're satisfied, all right? But if they weren't satisfied, they had that opportunity. Your opportunity now is to, again, the count. The opportunity now is the final exam. There will be no more extra credits. This is it. So focus on doing well. Don't freak out. Don't think about where your GPA is going to be. That'll take care of itself if you take care of the final exam. All right. Remember that you have seen almost all of the questions that will be on the final exam in one shape or form. Okay. Some of them will be exactly the same. I'm not going to make any change. I'm just going to select it on, out of my pool of questions and throw it right in. Other questions, as I said, I'm going to modify a little bit. I'm not going to change them to something completely different, but I might add some information and stuff just to keep us all honest. Make sure that people really do have the knowledge and they just didn't memorize the answers. But you've seen them before, so you should have some comfort with them. They're not going to be out of left field. However, I do have to add, we talked about, after quiz 5, we talked a little bit more about Islam, and we talked about that video that I showed you from CBS News. So clearly, there are going to be questions about that. There was no quiz 6. I certainly wasn't going to give you a quiz just days before your finals started. I want you focused on, completing your course requirements, not just my course requirements, but all of your course requirements, and not being like, oh man, I got another quiz to do for this dude. No. So these things will certainly appear. They have to be covered, I think. Will certainly appear on the final exam. How many? I would say you should expect at least 10 questions of different variety, true, false, multiple choice, etc., on these things, on the final stuff about Islam, on Tibetan Buddhism, or really Buddhism in general. I didn't go too deep in it much. Well, I don't think I did much about Tibetan Buddhism at all, but Buddhism in general, Christian Science, and Jainism. So you should expect those. Number 2, my next point, look at your notes. Look at them. Don't try to, again, the cat wants to go. Get out of here. Go. And the other cat comes in. Look at your notes. Notice I'm not saying memorize your notes. Which, me being obsessive compulsive, when I was a student, I tried to do that, and you sit there with your notes and you go over the page and you read everything and then, okay, close it and okay, can I repeat it back? Like you're an actor practicing for a part. And for me, I don't know about you, that's one of the circles of hell. That's misery. And what I found actually as I progressed along as a student was it was better just to read my notes like a book. Okay. Just to read them, look at them, go over them rather than trying to commit them to memory. Some things you have to commit to memory. Some things you do have to kind of memorize. But I would say my recommendation would be don't try to memorize in general. It's not really helpful, and it puts a lot of pressure on you. Obviously, some things sometimes you have to memorize. I mean, if you're doing mathematics or a science course, biology or physics, obviously there are all sorts of formulae that you have to memorize and know, like bump, 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 because otherwise you can't answer the question. But in the artsy sciences, like this is, you can kind of get away with having more of the general overview. You kind of know what the idea is, even if you can't articulate it in a formula or something like that in the hard sciences, if that makes any sense. So read them like you're just reading an article or a novel or something on the internet. Just you don't necessarily have to obsess over every detail, but read it and get a sense of what the material is saying, and think about it a little bit. Okay, don't try to be. Obviously, it would be a sensible thing, a prudent thing to do to memorize certain things. You have to recognize that there are some things that do have to be kind of memorized and learned, not just understood. So the 5 pillars of Islam, the 10 commandments, the Vedas, the 4 noble truths. Okay. And right there in the very names of the thing, they kind of help you out. There, there are 5 pillars of Islam. So if you can only remember 4, then you're missing one. The 10 Commandments. If you can only remember 4, then you're missing 6. And even in even with something like the 10 Commandments, which is only 10 things, don't worry about or any of these things like 5 pillars, the 4 noble truths, the Vedas. Don't worry about knowing them in order. I'm not going to commit people to knowing things in order on the questions. It's not going to be like, okay, you didn't know that. And even with me, it's like, even like the 10 Commandments, because I have to go through them. I have to constantly remind myself of stuff as well. I mean, it just doesn't flow like I wish it did, but I don't have that kind of memory. So what's the first one? Well, God, believing in one God and worshiping one God. The next one is, remembering to keep his name holy and not blaspheming, and then keeping the Sabbath day. And after that comes honoring your parents. And then, this section, I kind of sometimes reverse stuff, but I know it. It's, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't commit adultery. Okay, so don't kill them. I'm not going to be like, okay, the 5th commandment, what exactly is it? As long as you know what they are, that's the important point. That what the 5 pillars of Islam is, what the Vedas. Of course, you probably already know this, that there are techniques to memorize and to learn things. So, for example, with the Vedas, we know there's the Rig, the Yajur, the Sama, the Atharva. And just if you took the first letters of each, you get the word Rysa, Rysa. And I could send you a text message about that through Zoom if I could figure out where it is again. It's under reactions. Oh, okay. Well, interesting. I'm just does it allow me? Whoops. If I go under participants, now I can invite people. All right, whatever. Yeah. I'm sure they didn't take it away. I would imagine they didn't take it away, but it might not be something that's available, maybe through the administrator or something. Hold on one second. Mute participants, ask all to unmute, lock meeting now. So it's not allowing that. Anyways, so those options aren't there. They were when I used Zoom before at another school, but they don't seem to be here. Anyways, but RYSA, RISA. So you remember that, and you can remember hopefully you can remember the names as you're going through. Or, for example, in Hinduism, there are a lot of scriptures. You have the Shruti scriptures, but you also have the Smriti, and the Smriti are the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, which includes the Bhagavad Gita. Then you have law books called Dharma Shastras, and you have the myths called Puranas. So if you put that into a little statement, or it's kind of like when maybe you were in school and you learned music and they were going through the scale with where all the notes are, and you have every good boy deserves fudge and face, which are to show you, which lines a certain note goes on. You can use the same thing here, like for the Smriti, real men buy gold and drive Pontiacs. Now, real men don't. I'm not trying to be nasty or anything. I don't mean, it's just a helpful thing. Real men buy gold and drive Pontiacs. Buy gold. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't have to mean anything, right? In fact, it's probably better that it is a little unusual, because it does kind of give you a little mind fart, as they say, like, well, buy gold. Why would real men have to buy gold? What do you mean by real men, Dr. Dunn? With anyways, but it helps you remember real men, RMBGDP. Okay, R Ramayana, men, Mahabharata, buy gold, Bhagavad Gita, drive Pontiacs, Dharma Shastras, Puranas. Okay. Some things you don't have to memorize and should just have a general knowledge of, like the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, I'm not, I wouldn't ask you to memorize all the 13 principles of faith or the Noble Eightfold Path. I mean, some things are just too long, and they're not that they're not important. They're important to the religion, but then, it's not. I'm more interested that you have a general knowledge, a bird's eye view of, kind of like what Maimonides says in the 13 principles, like the oneness of God, and belief in prophets, and the belief in the Messiah, belief in resurrection of the dead, things that I might have pointed out, like I thought were important, like ideas like the resurrection of the dead or the Messiah and stuff like that. The same thing with like the 8 Noble Eightfold Path, where I talked about, kind of pointed to mindfulness and meditation, and that those are included within this whole structure of how to remove desire and suffering. So again, going back to my original point, be sensible about what you do need to memorize. Know that you need to memorize it. You might have just one final thought, but don't have to memorize definitions. Well, yeah, you would kind of, if this were a written test in class, and I asked you what is such and such, and I would expect you to give me back the definition I gave you, or something close to it, because I know sometimes people, don't always remember everything, but they write it and they've kind of got the idea there, but maybe it's not exactly word for word. Still makes it difficult, because then people can leave stuff out, and I have to think about, like, does the person really mean this or not? But that's not an issue here. The answer's there. Okay. So again, that should take the pressure off you. You don't have to memorize exactly the definition of religion. You know that I gave it to you. Look at it, be able to recognize it. So when you come to a multiple choice, you're like, okay, Then again, you should also expect me to trick you and give different variants of the same definition, which are not correct. So be aware of that. Okay, next point. Organize for success. Organize. What do I mean by that? Well, you can use your notes on the exam. Think about that. So think about that procedure and what you're going to do. Because I didn't, when I was a student, I can't remember any time that in my memory that I could actually use my notes on like a final exam. Pretty much had to know. I remember, just a little side thing, maybe this is interesting or not, I did an exchange student year in Ireland, and they had the final exams at the end of the year. So everything I had learned from when I showed up in, like, I think October or something, maybe it was September, but I remember October, all the way to the end, which was like May. These exams covered everything from every class. And everyone was in a big hall, and you had blue books. You had blue books, or I think it were blue books, or just paper, if I remember. But nevertheless, you get the point. It was you with a pen and paper, and you had questions from each course that you took, and specific questions from things that were discussed. And you were just there on your lonesome, and you couldn't even really cheat, because everyone else was doing other stuff during their courses, which were different, right? So, and you were at a table, and you couldn't really, they had like, a partition on your table. You couldn't really look around, if I'm remembering correctly. And you just had several hours where you're sitting there, and you got to get it done. So why was I telling you this? Okay. So, I mean, you couldn't bring notes in at all, obviously, not that I remember. So sometimes you can use notes, sometimes you can't. In this case, you can use your notes. Make sure that you know how you're going to use your notes, because if you can bring notes in or use notes, a lot of times I think people just think, okay, I'll have my notebook out in front of me on the computer, and as I'm going through, if there's something I run into I don't know, I can flip through my notes and find it in my notes and find the answer. And I think that's just, that's what a person would immediately kind of gravitate to. But I would, if you think about it, that's not really an efficient way of using your time, especially when you've got a time limit and it's a major exam, like a final exam. You want to be able to be organized. So as I thought about it, I'm like, well, what would be a better way of doing that? I would take my notes, rip them out, cut them out with some scissors, or just, if you don't want to do that, find a photocopier and copy each section of the notes. So what I mean is, like, you copy the section on religion at the beginning of the course. Then we went into Hinduism. Actually, we talked about the Catholic Church and other religions. You have that, you copy that, the section on Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, et cetera, and so forth, and staple them together and have each one as a separate thing. So you know where each one is. So if a question comes up that you don't know, like something, they say it's something from way back at the beginning of the course on the Catholic Church and other religions, you can reach to that immediately. Ignore all the other stuff. You're not flipping through your notes trying to find it. It's right there in front of you. And you can just look and look for the answer and see, do I have this? Did I write this down? Okay. If you didn't, then you're out of luck. Then you have to just go by this. But I think that's a good way to handle it. You have the sections and you know where each one is. It's easy to pick it up and you're not wasting your time flipping through a notebook trying to find something. Because remember, you have pretty much a minute for each question. So you can't spend 5 minutes on just one question. And in fact, you probably should set kind of like your own little time limit, like how long am I going to waste? Well, no, I shouldn't say that, but at some point you are wasting time on a question. You're looking at something, and again, you see this when people take tests in class. That a person will be sitting there focused on just one question and just cannot move off of it because the person doesn't know the answer, but they want to know the answer, and they're hoping that some light bulb will go off. And you know what? If you don't know it, you just got to admit sometimes, I don't know this at all. Not that you don't remember it. If you can think about it a little bit and spark a little remembrance, okay. But if it's really like, this is now 2 minutes I've spent on this, now it's 2.5 minutes, I really know I don't know this, select an answer and move on, okay? If you really don't know it, okay? Now, Dr. Dunn is not telling you just put in any answer, because a person might say, well, I did what you said and I got it wrong, and so I got a lower grade. No, I mean, you have to make that decision for yourself. You have to decide at what point you're spending too much time on a question that you really kind of know you don't know. And you got to cut your losses and put some answer down, because no answer gets you nothing. No answer gets you nothing. But if you put something down, you might get credit or partial credit. There is one caveat. There is one warning about that. When you have questions like multiple answer questions, this is a problem with Blackboard. I hate Blackboard, by the way, but that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going to go on a rant on Blackboard. But with Blackboard, if I give a multiple, and this is a glitch in the way Blackboard is set up. Like if I give a multiple answer question, a person could just conceivably select every answer that's there and still get full credit. How? Well, because the answers are still there with the wrong answers. But the way Blackboard sets up multiple answer questions by design, that as long as the correct answers are selected, it's correct. And even if a person went through and selected all sorts of other answers that were wrong, unless you tell it to, Blackboard doesn't penalize that in any way. So I have to make sure that I penalize that. So I will set a multiple answer question to penalize a student who answers wrongly. That just has to be the way it is, because otherwise, a person could just select all the answers, right and wrong, and still get full credit because the right answers are in there. They're there. So a person who selects a wrong answer, okay, has to receive some sort of deduction because the person didn't recognize that it was wrong. They should. I mean, I would like it where Blackboard set it up so that you only get credit for the right answers. Well, I guess that is how it's set up. You only get credit for the right answers and you get no credit for the wrong answers. But then, of course, the problem with that, which makes no sense, is that a person could still select the wrong answers. Just select everything and you get credit for the right answers and no credit for the wrong answers. So you get full credit. Problem solved. So I have to mitigate against that by setting Blackboard so that you will be punished so that a person can't just do that. A person who's figured that out, every time they see a multiple answer question, they might just say, okay, I answer everything, but move on. I know, didn't know the answers necessarily, but I got it right because that's the way Blackboard's set up. So just know that for multiple answer questions, be aware of that. You need to be, I said, if you're spending a lot of time on it and you really don't know, select something. Okay. But you might get lucky and get some of the right answers. But if you get some of the wrong answers, you might also get points taken off. So that's a little warning about that. Try to understand. The best way to study, I think, is to act like you're explaining something to somebody else. So if you can explain karma in a way that someone else would understand it, then you probably are going to do okay on the test. You have a good understanding of what it is. You're not going to fall into any pitfalls on true false. You're going to be able to figure out definitions and multiple answers or whatever. Just as an example, or if you can explain the Four Noble Truths, basically, then you should be fine. If someone else can understand it, if you're having difficulty explaining it to yourself or explaining it in a way that you think someone would understand it, then, you got to go back and look it over and understand. Try and see the connections between the ideas. Try to get into the mind of a person who believes in karma. Just don't try to be a parrot and look at your notes and say, okay, Dr. Dunn said karma is this, karma is not, all right, those are just words coming out of your mouth. Think about them, because by thinking about them, your mind makes connections and kind of draws out the logic. Even if you're not a believer in karma or a Hindu or a Buddhist, and this is not part of your idea system, nevertheless, you kind of think out the logic of it on your own, and it prepares your mind for what you're going to be doing for the testing purpose. It's better to understand the definition than to just parrot it back. It's really better to understand it and be able to explain it, especially for testing purposes, because, they're like true, false and stuff. You're going to have to think about the question. You have to think about the information that's in front of you. There's something else I wanted to say about that. Well, okay. Anyways, no, just a mind flit through my head, or thought flit through my head, my mind. Know that the articles and the textbook readings will almost certainly not be on the exam. I did ask specific questions from the articles, mostly I think from the articles, somewhat from the textbook on the quizzes. But as I say in the syllabus, that's to keep people honest and to make sure that they're doing the readings. And so if they're not, then, those questions were going to be kind of hard for them. But for on the exam, you can be almost certain. I'm not saying I might not choose to include something and change my mind if I think it's really important, but almost certain that I'm not going to take something from any of the articles or the readings that we had for each religion. But readings from primary texts, like stuff that might have been put on the PowerPoint that I thought were illuminating, were providing evidence of some religious belief or something, you should be attentive to those. If you're looking through the PowerPoints and you see that I have a quotation from the Quran, or I quote from Mary Baker Eddy's Scientific Statement of Being, or some church document back from, Nostra Aetate from Vatican II, you might want to take a look at it. Just read it over and be aware of what it says, because it might show up, because it's kind of like a primary source text and it's important. It's directly related to the religion, whereas articles that I gave you to read and the textbook are not really directly related. They're talking about what we're talking about, and they're meant to, show you other things, like things are going on in the world and make you aware of certain issues that might be happening with a religion today, basically to remind you that these religions are still around. They're not just something we're talking about in a classroom, that they're going on and things are happening right now. Many, what do I have here? Okay, many of them, I think I already mentioned this, but I'll say it again. Many of the questions will focus on matching, multiple answer, true, false. Oh, okay, I didn't say this. So if you're asking, like, there will be multiple choice, but I'm going to try and minimize multiple choice, because those can sometimes be a little bit too easy to answer. I'm really, on the final exam, want to see your knowledge, that what you've taken away from the course, that a person has been paying attention and putting in the work. And just give you a little kudos to the people who are here. It says something that you're here. Okay. Because as I'm looking at my participants window, 2 people out of 2 different sections I'm teaching, and both of you are from the same section, and no one else decided to take the time. Okay. Maybe they'll watch the live stream later. I don't judge. People are busy. However, it's also one of these things, as I said before, the ultimate grade you're going to get, if a person's worried about GPA or worried about, this is just an intro course, it's going to take down my grade. Yeah, but it's not going to. It wouldn't do that if you put in the effort. So just offering that kudos to you and that compliment to those who are here, because I do want to judge people's understanding of the material. But there will be multiple choice, but I do want to try to give privilege or pride of place to matching a multiple answer and true false, because I think those kinds of things really show the information that people have retained, and especially with like true false, their ability to think about it, recognize when it's not true or something, or the information is wrong. Those are the best ways to see if a person's been paying attention. Take your time. Don't freak out. It's 2 hours, yes. So there is a time limit. It's not eternal. There is a time limit on the test. So don't freak out with that. I mean, I tried to I was hoping mitigate that problem by giving a really long time period, but I didn't mean for it to be misinterpreted. But such is life. So you've got 2 hours. Just consider the fact, just remind yourself that even if you've spent time, don't rue over spending time on a question, because you're not going to get it back, first of all. But also, you might have to spend 2 minutes or something on a question, but other questions you might fly through. Within like 10 seconds, you might know this is false. Boom, click on to the next one. Oh yeah, multiple choice. Oh, I see the answer immediately. Boom, 10 seconds. Yeah. So it kind of all, in a way, I think of the Buddhist way, or Buddha, the via media, the middle way of Buddhism, don't go to extremes. Everything kind of balances out in a way. Or maybe it's more yin and yang rather than Buddhism. Yin and yang would be more associated with, I guess, Taoism. But, things kind of balance themselves out. Yes, there are some questions you're going to spend more than a minute on, I would imagine, but there are going to be some questions that you're going to fly through and whatever. So just don't pay attention to the time, but don't freak out about it. Be aware of it, but don't rush yourself so that you make mistakes and get a wrong answer. But on the other hand, as I said before, don't dilly-dally. Don't, with Mary Baker Eddy, don't haunt the driveway. You know what I'm saying? Don't hang around when you know that you're not going anywhere with this question. You don't know the answer, and say it's a true false, and it's like, okay, I'm going to say it's false. I can't tell. Boom, and move on, and let the chips fall where they may. Maybe you might get lucky. Okay, but it usually works out. So my next point. I already mentioned this about make absolutely sure you're taking the test in a stable environment. Okay. This is a quiz, not a final exam. So yeah, I already committed myself to changing what I said about not reopening the exam. Okay. I guess I'll be flexible because, people can get worried, and I understand that. And as I said, people are worried about maybe their score in the course. Okay, fine. So, but there's going to be a penalty. It's not a quiz. It's a final exam. It's a major, major portion. It's the highest rated. It's the highest weighted, and has the most amount of points out of everything else you're doing in the course. So it's very important, and you need to be in that mindset of this. I got to take this properly. So that there are no problems. Okay, I'm going to be much stricter on doing it properly. I already mentioned. Let's see. I think I covered everything on this. I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Are there any? Now you've been listening to me for almost an hour. Is there anything that you have questions on?
I don't think so.
Nope. Ms. Collins, no? Okay.
I think I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
Oh,
the main thing
okay.
I was worried about was if there were any specific readings we would have to look at, but you kind of covered that.
Okay. I'm glad I did, sir. So now you know what to focus on, yes?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. Okay, I think there's nothing else that I have written down, and nothing new has popped into my head. So if that's it, I'm going to end the meeting now. But if you want to go over it again, so two things. If you want to go over it again, I'm live streaming it, so it's available on my YouTube page, and I'll make a link available as well. And number two, if you do have further questions, then just email me, please, and I can email you back, or we can Zoom or whatever. Okay. So I'm going to end the meeting if there is no objection.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Thank you, miss, for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, here I go.